Alright, welcome back to Route Double. Last left off, we jumped into Chapter 4. And we got a really long explanation of stuff. Oh, that's right, we were practicing our BC. And I was starting to get really frustrated because we had a really long explanation of stuff we already knew.
何さNatsuhiko、教官に向けてその口の聞き方は。
教官?
As Natsuhiko spoke in confusion, Mashiro puffed up her chest in pride.
そう、私が貴様らの BC 教官を任命された鳥羽真白仙人軍曹である。
Oh no, that's adorable.
これから口でクソ垂れる前と後にさーとつけろ。わかったか、ひよっこども。
Those are lines from a famous war movie. Though she did try to tone down the language. Let me see your war face! Bullshit, I don't believe you! Let me see your real war face!
いいからさ、イエスサーとか言っとけ。そうすりゃこいつも満足するから。
That's better!
わかった。さあ、イエスサー。よろしい。それでは早速訓練を始める。
Mashiro faced Natsuhiko and Sally as she spoke.
それでは最初は目の前の相手の脳波形を知覚してみろ。どんなひよっこコミュニケーターでも集中すれば必ずできる。やってみ。
さあ、イエスサ
ー。Natsuhiko played along for the time being as he focused on Sally in front of him. This is the only part I'm good at. He shut his eyes and sharpened his senses. Eventually, Sally's characteristic brain waveform flickered in the back of Natsuhiko's mind. I saw it, it's type 4. It's the waveform of artists and eccentrics. Hers was quite varied from the archetypical characteristic, but he somehow managed to perceive it correctly. Okay. Natsuhiko opened his eyes and spoke to Sally.
知覚できたよ。サリュはタイプ4だ。
Sally opened her eyes wide as Natsuhiko pointed at the Enneagram.
そうなの？初めて知った。
サリュはどうだ？僕の脳波を知覚できた？
多分あれだと思う。
Sally pointed at the upper part of the Enneagram.
さすがサリュも早いな。そう、僕はタイプ7だ。
Natsuhiko didn't quite understand why it was his classification, but it was said to be the brain waveform of enthusiastic people. Well, I guess predicting personality with brainwaves is kind of like predicting it with blood types. That is, it's not that accurate at all. Natsuhiko pondered. Mashiro spoke with satisfaction.
さすがだな、二人とも。よろしい。貴様らは今をもってひよっこを卒業した。
え？卒業早くないか？
いや、この喋り方疲れるからさ、普通に戻ろうかなって。そうしてくれると助かる。いやいや、失敬。
Mashiro laughed out loud before continuing.
それじゃあ次は実際にテレパシーを送信してみようか。テレパシーのコツは心から強く念じることだよ。思ってもいないことよりも心底思ってることの方がやりやすいかも。
なるほど。心底思ってることか。
Natsuhiko pondered that trick. Sally tugged on his sleeve.
夏彦、やってみて。
ああ、じゃあ早速。
Working on it. Natsuhiko concentrated the best of his ability. Starving, maybe the rice gruel was too good with helping digestion. Hope class ends soon so we can have lunch already. Tended to send the message that he truly felt from the bottom of his heart. I'm hungry! No matter how desperately he concentrated, Sally said nothing and her expression didn't change at all.
どう？僕のテレパシー届いた？
全く。
そうか。やっぱりか。
He really was bad at BC. The telepathy he used 3 days ago was looking more and more like some kind of fluke.
焦らず交代で練習してみようよ。それじゃあ今度はサリュがやってみて。了解した。
Sally put her hand up to her temple. She looked serious. That was their first time seeing Sally use BC. Natsuhiko watched in bated breath to see the extent of her ability.
お腹減った。
That's the voice he heard. But it wasn't information firing off in his brain, but her natural voice passing through her lips. Whoops. So we're both just as good.
サリュー、声出てるよ、声。そう。
Salyu calmly answered Mashiro's question.
もしかしてサリも BC 苦手なのか？
苦手？うん、おおむね。
Well, join the club, don't feel bad.
そうなのか。
The school naturally attracted students who wanted to become great communicators. People who were fully aware of how bad they were at BC, like Natsuhiko and Salyu, were a tiny minority. That alone was enough to make him feel genuine camaraderie.
やっぱり誰にでも弱点はあるものだな。
うるさい。
え
違う違う、バカにしたわけじゃないよ。
Mean well, I promise.
むしろちょっとほっとしたっていうか。
Salyu looked on dubiously as Natsuhiko tried to gloss things over. That's when Enna spoke up to them.
あら、三宮さん、BC は苦手だったかしら。
そうみたいですよ。
そう。でも三宮さんの適正度は D ランクだと聞いてるわ。
Aptitude was, in a sense, a communicator's talent or latent ability. Rank D aptitude was fifth from the top. It was the lowest of aptitude among students at this school, but...
練習次第でちゃんとテレパシーなども身につくはずだけど、どう？
実はテレパシーも使用困難。もともと BC が苦手な上に体調に左右される。
ん？今日は調子悪いのか？
そう。使えないときは全く使えない。特に生理中とかは。
Okay.
え？
Natsuhiko and the others were taken aback by her abrupt use of that word.
そう。まああまり無理はしないでね。
This is getting awkward. Anna forced a stiff smile and let them be.
ね、サリュー。よくないよ、そういう話を男子の前でするの。そうなの？わかった。自重する。
ああ、それがいい。
Natsuhiko once again began to think that she was a really odd girl.
どうやら二人とも大体同じレベルみたいだね。
Alright then. That
じゃあ
happened.
ちょいとこの真っ白軍曹がお手本を披露しましょうか。
まあいいかもな、サリュのために。
お願いしたい。オッケー。それじゃあ自分の訓練も兼ねていろんなテレパシーをやってみせてあげるよ。
Different types? Mashiro took out her parapsychology textbook as she spoke. There were several BC skill training methods written in there. For example, according to the text, the best shortcut to improving telepathy skill was to actually use that ability. The best shortcut to improving telepathy was to use telepathy.
それじゃあテレパシー上達マニュアルパート15、抽象思考の送信。これは言語化できない思考を送る訓練だよ。言語化できない思考。例えば嬉しい感情とか悲しい思いとか言葉じゃ伝えにくい抽象的なメッセージを送るってこと。というわけで今から私いろんな感情をテレパシーで送ってみるよ。二人とも目つぶって受信に集中して。
はい。
Natsuhiko and Salyu closed their eyes. Eventually, Mashiro's voice rang out in their heads.
はい。じゃあまず和むような感情から。夏彦、サリュの順番で連続送信していくよ。
Then a gentle feeling welled up from the bottom of their hearts.
なんかほっとするな。
ほんわかしてきた。でしょでしょ。ちなみに私は基本的にいつもこんな気分だよ。
Oh, that's adorable.
それじゃあ次は悲しい感情。
The moment Mashiro said that, the pit of Natsuhiko's heart was torn out.
これはなんだ、泣きそうになるな。
この間お財布落とした時のことを思い出してるんだよ。送ってる私も泣きそうだよ。はい、そんじゃあ気を取り直して、お次は恋する気持ちを送っちゃうよ。
Right after he heard those words, Natsuhiko felt his heart clench.
甘ったるくて切なく、しかし情熱的な。
これは真白自身の恋する気持ちなの？
のんのん、これは一昨日読んだ恋愛漫画を回想することで私の脳内に想起されたイメージです。
ってお前何読んだんだこれ。
ずいぶん大人っぽいというか、少しエロティックな感じも。
秘密。まあサリにはまだ早い内容なのは間違いないね。
Where that Mashiro's telepathy performance came to a close.
とまあこんな塩梅だよ。どうだったかな二人とも。熟練者のテレパシーは。とても不思議な感覚。故郷でこんな優れたコミュニケーターに会ったことはない。初めての体験だった。真白はすごい。
ああ、テレパシーについてはますます上達したな。
ふふふ、鍛えてますから。
Woohoo.
まあこうして上達すればね、コミュニケーターにしかできないコミュニケーションが可能になるってわけだよ。
Gotta work your way up the communicator skill tree.
面白い。他にはどんなことができるの？例えばそうだね、複雑な論理思考の送信とか。それじゃあちょっとテキストを見ながら円周率を送信します。
As Mashiro said this, a long streak of numbers pounded Natsuhiko's brain.
3.1415926535897993238462638327950288。
Whoa.
うわ、これはなんか気持ち悪いな。
でもこれは普通の言葉でも伝えられることのように思える。まあ口で説明するより多少時間が節約できるかなって程度だね。だけどこういう地道なトレーニングが一番効果的なんだってさ。
The truth was that outside of her training time with Natsuhiko, Mashiro would work hard at this sort of practice. As a result, her telepathy precision increased, and she became capable of many different types of telepathy
とに
applications.
かく極めれば面白い能力だから2人ともやる気出して頑張ってみよう。まずは至近距離の親しい相手への言語送信からね。
さあイエスさ。
At Mashiro's suggestion, the two of them began telepathy practice a little more seriously than usual. But in the end, before either Natsuhiko or Salvi could successfully send a single message, the first hour of the class came to an end.
頑張ってみたけどやはり難しい。
なかなか道のりは厳しいな。
まあまあじっくりやっていこうよ。
As they were having that conversation, Enna addressed the students.
皆さん、今の授業で気になるところやわからない点があったら質問を受け付けるわよ。 BC うんちくならいくらでも語ってあげるからね。
Vast stock of BC knowledge, huh? I usually ignore all that, but feeling just a little bit more open to BC now, Natsuhiko decided to ask a small question for once.
先生。
あら天川くん、質問とは珍しいわね。何？
そういえばさっき近年になって BC の原理が続々解明されてきたってお話ししてましたけど、 BC 大発現の以前にもテレパシーとかって存在してたわけですよね。その頃はテレパシーとかってどういう風に捉えられてたんでしょうか？
なるほど、私が幼い頃のお話ね。そうね。まず人間が素粒子を媒介に情報を直接脳でやり取りするなんて予想もされてなかったわ。
でしょうね。情報の正体も分かってなかった時代の話だし。
でもひょっとしたら BC の存在自体はみんなおぼろげに感じ取っていたのかもしれないわよ。それまで人の雰囲気とかオーラと呼ばれていたもの、これは固有の波形のことを指していたのかもね。
へえ、そういう考え方もあるのか。
Sort of an interpretation of seeing someone's aura. Okay. After Natsuhiko spoke, Salvi cut into the conversation.
コミュニケーター以外がテレパシーなどを使った例は過去にはあるの？
Anna was taken aback by a student calling her by just her first name, but she still answered in good humor.
いい質問ね、三宮さん。ごく少ないけれど、状況によってはあり得るわ。例えば、いわゆる虫の知らせ。人が亡くなった瞬間を離れた場所にいる親族がなぜか察するっていうあの現象。あれは生命の危機に瀕した人の脳機能が生存本能により一時的に高まり、 BC レセプターをも活動させ、
Aha, there we have it.
テレパシーが発現して親族と通信する現象だという見方が強いの。いわば人生一度きり、最初で最後のテレパシーね。
Or as some might call it in certain circles, a disturbance in the force. I feel like that's obviously what's happening with Natsuhiko,
興味深い。
who has the aptitude, but only really comes into it in situations of big stress. Mashiro then added even more to the conversation.
じゃあ先生、そういう昔はオカルトって思われてたことも BC の一種として説明できたりしちゃうんですか？
その通り。だから超心理学は面白いのよ。もろもろの不思議な出来事を科学的に解明する学問でもあるからね。 BC 粒子が発見されてからというもの、もはやあらゆるオカルト現象は科学の対象になったと言っても過言ではないわ。極端な話、幽霊もひょっとしたら BC の一種ではなんて考えさえあるのよ。
Huh. How does that work?
え？幽霊が？
そうよ。さっき死に瀕した人はコミュニケーターじゃなくてもテレパシーを発現しうるって話をしたわよね。
You really gonna say that they're fucking astral projecting
そ
after
して
death or something?
テレパシーによって発生した BC のエネルギーは発生と同時に減衰し始めるけれど、すぐゼロになるわけではないわ。
Transmissions to family that just don't make it there.
つまり超強力なテレパシーは対象者がいようがいまいがしばらくその場にとどまりうる。するとどうなるかしら。
その人の死に場所に行くと生前の声が聞こえちゃうとか？
そうそう、恨めしやとかね。しかも BC なら感情も伝わるから恨めしいと思う気持ちも一緒に伝わったりして。
I hate that this actually makes some sort of sense in the logic of this game.
それは恐怖。
It actually makes some kind of sense.
でもある意味では死んだ人の思いはこの世に残るってことですね。
In most cases,
ロマンチックね、トバさん。でも実際その通りかもしれないわよ。魂や思考や記憶がエネルギーとして実在するならば、死者の思いが現世に残るのもむしろ当然のことだものね。
Anna and Mashiro smiled at each other. Geez, these two really like that sort of stuff, don't they? Natsuhiko mulled over the contents of their conversation. Breakdown came to an end. Let's begin the second hour of class. Oh god. Swear to god that actually took an hour. First time out. And explain the next topic to the students.
さて皆さん、次の時間ではエンパシーについて練習してみましょう。
So we're actually gonna be just sitting... We're actually just gonna be sitting through fucking... Oh god. 2 videos of being in
エンパ
class.
シーは他人の心を読む能力。これこそ BC の真髄よね。と言ってもこのクラスにはまだエンパシーを使える人はいないわね。
Seeing the students meekly shake their heads, Anna continued.
確かにエンパシーはテレパシーより数段難しいです。原理はテレパシーとそっくりなんだけどね。
Anna tampered with the computer as she spoke, causing text to appear on the screen.
まずテレパシーと同じ要領
We're
で
actually doing another
送
fucking
信相手の
lecture.
固有の波形を感知し 自分の脳と送信相手の脳を接続します。この接続時、送信相手もまたごくわずかな情報エネルギーを発しています。思考によって自然発生するエネルギー、固有脳波形よりさらに微細で複雑なもの、それを熟練したコミュニケーターは感知できてしまうのです。そしてコミュニケーターはその感知した情報エネルギーを脳内で分析します。分析に成功すれば自らの聴覚野に錯覚が起き、脳内に相手の心の声が響きます。以上、3ステップ。これがエンパシーの発現プロセスよ。
On hearing your explanation,
なるほど。でも言うだけなら簡単っぽいんですが。
one student spoke up first. The other students nodded in agreement.
そうね。実現が難しそうってのは私にもわかるわ。電話に例えるなら、電話相手が普通なら絶対聞き取れないような小さな声で喋っているようなものだもの。普通の会話でもそうね。人に話しかけるのはその気になればできるけど、人から話を聞き出すのは難しいものだし。
Anna smiled a little awkwardly as she continued.
でもいずれにせよ忘れてはいけないのは、エンパシーを使うにはもう一つ大切な原則があるってこと。それは対象者が心を開いていなければならないということよ。相手が心を開いていないのにエンパシーを使うと、心の声にはノイズがかかってしまいます。2つの脳が接続された時、送信相手の脳が本能的に危険を察知して思考を読ませまいというふうに働くのね。その自己防衛的機能がノイズという形になって現れるのです。だからエンパシーを使いたいときは、まず相手に心を読んでいいですよと思ってもらうことね。
That's okay, just break out the mood matrix and get to work reducing the noise.
そうしなければ、
That's
仮
all.
にエンパシーが発動しても相手の心の声はまともに聞こえやしないわ。
なるほどですね。でもどうしてそんな防衛機能が人間の脳には備えられているんですか？
Why do we equip computers with firewalls and antivirus programs? Upon hearing Mashiro's question, Anna grinned and replied.
わかりません。
あら、わからないって。
BC の研究は発展途上でね、諸説あるけど結論は出ていないのよ。例えば人が他者に対して不快感を覚えると脳内で思考が荒れて、それがノイズになるという説から、果ては大昔からコミュニケーターは存在していて、コミュニケーターではない人々が身を守るために得た機能だという説まで。
I mean, my thought would be, why do we recoil when someone gets too close to us? Or someone... Yeah, just... We all have our safety bubble, and just that's our mental safety bubble. If your dial-up brain connection guy starts to poke at my brain, then we... Just one of those natural
いろんな説
instincts.
があるけれど、今のところは謎なの。とりあえずそういうものだと思ってた方がいいと思うわ。まあもしこの防衛本能がなかったら、エンパシーっていう能力は本当に危険視されていたでしょうけどね。
A faint shadow cast over Anna's face as she said this. That's when Sally suddenly spoke up.
この学校にはエンパシーを使える生徒はいるの？
ええ、初等部から高等部まで数名ずつね。だからエンパシーがすごく難しい能力だとしても、決して夢物語というわけではないのよ。ちなみにエンパシーを使えるようになれば、能力レベルは無条件で4以上に認定されるからね。
Students got excited at those words. In this school, students with high BC ability levels were treated preferentially. Ability level 4 and 5 students in particular receive special privileges such as tuition waivers and scholarships. Even received recommendations to major in parapsychology in top colleges. Furthermore, students who can use empathy gain the respect of other students with that feat alone. I'm sure at an ordinary school, being able to read minds would get you beat up and ostracized. That was far from the case at Rokumei Academy. Rokumei Academy severely punished any instance of discrimination against empaths. As the school's original intent was to provide communicators protection against discrimination, this rule was strictly enforced.
というわけで皆さん目標は大きく持ってね。頑張る価値はきっとあるから。はーい。もちろんテレパシーができない人はその練習をしてていいわ。それぞれ自分のレベルに合わせて訓練するのよ。それでは皆さん隣の人と組んで実習開始。
With Anna's energetic command, the students all began working at once. Mashiro looked around the noisy classroom and spoke confidently.
よーし、今度は私のトレーニングタイムだね。
マシロ、エンパシーの練習をするの？
私テレパシーは使えてもエンパシーはさっぱりだからさ。天川博士から聞いてない？
そういえば聞いてた。2人の能力レベルについては、マシロは能力レベル3で、夏彦は能力レベル0だと。
母さん、そんな余計なことを吹き込んだのか。
Natsuhiko let out a humph. Ability level was a measurement of how much practical control one has over BC. In other words, it was a sort of measurement of one's worth. There were 6 levels in total from 0 to 5. Level 0 cannot use telepathy. Level 1 can use very short-range telepathy. Level 2 can use short-range telepathy. Level 3 can use long-range telepathy. Can use long-range telepathy and very short-range empathy. Can use very long-range telepathy and short-range empathy. Level divisions were roughly as shown above, omitting a few particulars. Ability level 3, Mashiro was a communicator capable of long-range telepathy. In other words, she was just one step away from being able to use empathy.
それじゃあ1時間目は2人に付き合ったんだから、この時間は私にこってり付き合ってもらうよ。
よし、いいだろう。
了解した。
最初は夏彦の心からでね。読ませてもらっていいかな？
いいよ。読めるものなら読んでみろ。
Once Natsuhiko gave his consent, Mashiro went right up into his face.
近すぎないか？
仕方ないでしょ。BC は対象者が近いほど使いやすいんだから。
Mashiro closed her eyes and said no more. Certainly enough, the energy of the BC particles used in BC transmissions would decrease proportionally with the distance between the Esper and the target. Naturally, since Mashiro was a beginner to empathy, it would only make sense for her to get right up close to Natsuhiko, but it feels so awkward. Natsuhiko got uncomfortable as he followed Mashiro's lead and closed his eyes too.
夏彦、心開いてる？
Gonna try. Mashiro spoke from right in front of him. Natsuhiko whispered in reply.
開いてるよ。多分。
そう？全然心の声が聞こえないんだけど。もっと心開いて。
そんなこと言ったってな。どうすりゃいいんだか。
難しく考えなくていいと思うよ。私に対し親密な気分でいればいいんだから。そしてこう集中して何か分かりやすい言葉を念じてみて。
わかった。
Natsuhiko drove out all thoughts of embarrassment as he tried to focus. I'm really hungry. The second hour is really too long to bear. Same, Natsuhiko. I'm in the same boat as you. I'm hungry, so damn hungry. At that moment, Natsuhiko noticed Mashiro's body twitch.
聞こえた。
何？
Natsuhiko opened his eyes in surprise. Staring right at him was Mashiro's overly confident face.
夏彦の心の声が魂の叫びが聞こえたよ。
なんて聞こえたんだ？
マシロってほんとかわいいな。トレーニングのためとはいえ、マシロとこんなに接近できるなんて役得だぜって。
残念不正解。一文字も合ってない。
Natsuhiko stared coldly at Mashiro as she spouted off lines far detached from reality.
ひどいや夏彦。もう少し乗ってくれても。
だってお前いつものことだろ。
It was almost a habit for Mashiro to screw around during empathy practice. Mashiro had rank B aptitude. The value that high, it wouldn't be strange at all for her to have eventually gained the use of empathy. But she remained at ability level 3 for the past few years. Yet she never took practice seriously.
そんなんだからいつまで経ってもエンパシーが身につかないんだよ。
能力レベル0の夏彦に言われたくないよ。なんだ、夏彦とはきっと相性が悪いんだい。それじゃあサリュー、練習に付き合ってくれる？うん、わかった。
Mashiro got close to Sally and closed her eyes. Sally opening her heart. Natsuhiko watched in bated breath. Eventually, Mashiro opened her eyes wide.
聞こえた、サリューの声が。お腹減ったって。正解。
おいマシロ、それはエンパシーを使わなくてもわかる。っていうかさっき言ってたぞ。
何さ、文句が多いな夏彦は。
そんな問題じゃなくてだな。
Natsuhiko and Mashiro's voices filled the BC room. They spent some more time practicing, but in the end, Mashiro didn't come up with any results at all. Eventually, Anna spoke up near the end of class.
鳥羽さん、エンパシーのコツ少しは見えてきたかしら。
全然見えません。
Voices saying "same here" popped up all across the classroom.
いや、気を落とすことはないわよ。超絶的に難しい技術だと私も思うもの。
どうすれば身につくんでしょうね。
そうね。先生はコミュニケーターじゃないから技術的なアドバイスはできそうにないのだけど、何でもとある研究者の発表によると BC の能力開発については当人の意思がかなり重要になるという話だわ。
意思？
そう。テレパシーの使用については他者に自分の気持ちを伝えたいと思う意思。エンパシーの使用については他者の気持ちを知りたいと思う意思。単純な精神論のようだけどこれが非常に大切らしいのよ。何しろ脳で行うコミュニケーションですもの。そういう意思が重要になるのは無論のことよね。
わかる気がします。
Natsuhiko also felt like he understood. After all, if that were indeed the case, it'd only be obvious that someone as disinterested in BC as Natsuhiko would be unable to even use telepathy. Then he thought about the accident several days ago and how he tried to warn Mashiro with all his heart to get away from the car. Maybe that's why I was only able to use telepathy that one time. And it continued as Natsuhiko pondered to himself.
いわば BC は意思を伝え合う技術であり、心を通わせるための能力とも言えるわ。誰かに本当に気持ちを伝えたくなった時、誰かの心を知りたいと思った時、あなたたちの能力も花開くのかもしれない。みんな程度の差はあれど適正度は優れているはずだもの。あとはきっと心の問題なの。
The truest part of all this.
だから希望を捨てず訓練に邁進してみてね。
Anna finished speaking right as the bell rang.
はい。それじゃ今日の実習は終わり。皆さん、2時間お疲れ様でした。
Oh, well, that happened. Class ended and thus lunch break began. Natsuhiko left the classroom and made the arduous journey through the whirlpool of telepathy. Here we go again.
中田さん、俺はようやく覚悟を決めました。いろいろ考えたんだけど、やっぱり会って直接話したいと思います。放課後、屋上に来てくれますか？
そう、それでいいのよ。テレパシー通じてあんたの思いは十分伝わったから話すことないかもしれないけど、それでも り直接会わなきゃね。私もこれだけ全校生徒に事の顛末知られたらもう怖いものないわ。逃げたりしないでちゃんと屋上に行ってあげる。まあそれで OK するかどうかは別問題だけど、放課後楽しみにしてるわ。じゃあね。
はい。
おお、甘酸っぱいな。青春だな。俺らも野球なんてやってる場合じゃねえな。
しかし紅崎よ、どうやら俺たちには思考性テレパシーはまだ無理らしいな。
そうだな。どうするシン。放課後の時間がぽっかり空いちまったぞ。
屋上で誰かが誰かに告白するみたいだぞ。冷やかし。
お前このバカタレ、人の恋路を邪魔するなよ。
冗談だよ。まあせっかくだし、その誰かが安心して告白できる手助けをしよう。やじ馬が集まらないよう警備するとかな。
そりゃいいな。でおい、なんで俺たちこんな話までテレパシーで話してるんだ。
あ、まずいな。癖になっちまったようだ。
Hello everybody! エンジェル神谷とザ・コミュニケーターズです。宗像ちゃんと七志くんの劇場型恋愛、みんな固唾を飲んで見守っていることだろう。そこで2人の前途を祝福し、我が軽音部から1曲送らせてもらおうと思う。それではお聴きください。 Myself Yourself。
それお前らの曲じゃねえだろが。
たまにはオリジナルやりやがれ。
バンド名がダセえんだよ。
俺は良かれと思って。
Natsuhiko ignored the commotion in his head and muttered.
やれやれ、今日も無駄骨だったか。
同意。まあまあ、日々の地道な修練がやがて実を結ぶんだって。
そんなものかね。まあ最後の話はちょっと興味深かったけどさ。
When Natsuhiko shrugged his shoulders, Sally tugged at his sleeve and implored him.
それより早く食事にしよう。昼休みは無限にはない。そうだね。3人で一緒に屋上でご飯食べようか。
じゃあその前に購買に寄っていこう。
Three of them made their way. They stocked up on baked goods and started heading for the roof. Natsuhiko bought a katsu sandwich and yakisoba bread. Mashiro bought a sandwich, donut, waffle, and pudding. As for Sally, she bought 7 varieties of bread in total.
サリュー、ずいぶん買ったね。
Hungry.
どれが美味しいのかわからなかったから、いろいろ試してみようと思った。決して食欲に任せてのことではない、味に対する探求心。
That's totally it. Totally not gonna finish them all.
まあそういうことにしておこうか。
Mashiro and Natsuhiko looked at each other and smiled wryly. It's obviously not the case since she kept saying how hungry she was a while ago. Perhaps Sally was ashamed of her own gluttony.
でも真白も人のことは言えない。そんな甘そうな食物ばかり大量に買って。
そうだよな。こいつも意外によく食べるんだ。ドーナツかワッフルかどっちかにしといた方が良かったんじゃないか。
いいのいいの。私は体質的に太らないようにできてんだから。
As they were having that conversation, they reached a turn in the hallway when suddenly...
おっと
Moribe! Mashiro ended up tumbling down. She apparently ran into a woman on the other side of the turn. Hey, Jun's theme!
あったった。ありゃりゃ、大丈夫？
The woman that bumped into Mashiro reached out her hand.
ごめんごめん、よそ見しちゃってたよ。立てる？あ、はい、平気です。こっちもよそ見してましたし。あれ？
We do know that Jun did know these three from after. Mashiro exclaimed in surprise as she got up.
もしかしてこの間のどこかで会ったっけ？
マシロ知ってる人か？
いやほら、あの時の事故現場で。
Those words jogged Natsuhiko's memory.
あ、ひょっとして。
A rescue worker that responded to the traffic accident 3 days ago.
安心しなって、私たちが来たからにはね。
That's her. Said rescue worker raised her voice as if she too had just remembered.
ああ、あの事故の時通報してくれた子たちだね。え、覚えててくれたんですか？嬉しいな。嬉しいって？救助の様子見てて一発でファンになっちゃったんですよ。すごくかっこよかったです。そんないいもんじゃないよ。先月配属されたばっかりでね。
そうなんですか？
いやでもむしろすごいですよ。配属したてであんなあっという間の救出劇をやっちゃうなんて。
I was under the impression that Jun knew these three well before this. More, as in more than 3 days prior to the incident. But, alright. Worker blushed as Mashiro showered her with praise.
褒められるためにこの仕事してるわけじゃないけど、やっぱ嬉しいもんだね。
Seeing that smile gave Natsuhiko an impression. I see. Guess she genuinely likes helping people out. He thought it made her a noble person, but it also made him feel like a commoner in comparison. But Mashiro, on the other hand, seemed to take a liking to her. She cheerfully introduced herself.
私、鳥羽真白って言います。こっちは友達の。
どうも、天川夏彦です。
三宮ルイーズユイ。ハーフなの？さすが噂の六名学園、国際的なんだね。
What are you doing here?
私は森部純でいいよ。はい、よろしくです純さん。
それにしてもこの間はレスキュー隊が来てくれるとは思いませんでしたよ。
そういえば確かに普通もっと大掛かりな災害の時とかに出動するんじゃ。いやあの日はたまたま別件であの近くに出場かかっててさ、その帰りに連絡を受けてあの現場に急行したんだ。出場から出場の連続でレスキューってのも楽じゃないね。
Fair.
大変そうですね。
いやいや、好きな仕事だからどうってことはないよ。でもジュンさんはどうしてレスキュー隊に入ったんですか？
Hey now, you're trying to unlock level 4 backstory in your first meeting.
すっごく大変だと思うんですけど。
Level 4 backstory here, Mashiro. Jun pondered that question for a moment before answering.
こんなこと言ったら笑われそうだけど、私さ、ヒーローになりたかったんだよね。
Oh.
ヒーロー？
Yeah, it's fine as is.
子供の頃からの憧れでさ。
Natsuhiko found himself intrigued by her words. Okay, that's the, someone's actually living my childhood dream? That's the simple, non-complicated, non-difficult explanation from Jin. Fair. Natsuhiko himself had wished to be that sort of person at one point. And so did Mashiro.
わかります。
Oh
私
no.
も子供の頃は大好きなこの街を守ろうと胸の中で誓ったりしました。見どころあるよそりゃ。ここ卒業したら消防学校入るといいよ。
でも珍しいですね。ヒロインじゃなくてヒーローに憧れるなんて。
Semantics,
いや
Natsuhiko.
ー、
Oh.
私ってば子供の頃からなんつうか男勝りでね。誰かに助けられるヒロインより誰かを助けるヒーローになりたいって思っててさ。
Without the distinction, that's fair. Alright.
で、ヒーローを目指すなら
Still don't like it, but
レスキュ
alright.
ー隊かなってさ。ヒーローの定義とかって難しいけど、人の命を救うってのは間違いなく正しいことだしね。
Pretty damn heroic, yeah.
そう思います。命より大切な宝物なんてどこにもないですもんね。お、あんたいい子だね。よ
Pat
し
pat.
よし。
Pat pat. Mashiro smiled as Jun patted her on the head. These two kind of seem like they're on the same wavelength. If nothing else, both Jun and Mashiro seem to enjoy helping people. Natsuhiko pondered the similarity. Jun continued. So what are you doing
ま
here?
あシリウスに入るような人は多かれ少なかれそんな感じなんじゃないかな。 実際うちの代も給料安いわ仕事きついわなのになりたがる人は後を絶たないからね。
そういえば他にも女性の方がいましたね。
ああ、あれうちの副隊長ね。
good old
あ
Casmy.
の人はすごいよ。どんな危険な現状にも平然と飛び込んでいって完璧に任務をこなすパーフェクトウーマンなんだよ。
おー、それもかっこいい。
副隊長さんがそうだったら、隊長さんはどんな人ですか？
ああ、隊長は
June made a slightly bitter face at that thought.
隊長さんは？
まさか何か問題でも？
とんでもない。あの人も超優秀なんだけど、ただ性格がちょっとクールすぎるっていうかドライっていうか。
Even Natsuhiko and Mashiro could tell she was struggling to find the right words. Does his personality clash with Jun's, maybe? As soon as he pondered that possibility, Jun looked at her watch and spoke up.
おっとやばい、もうこんな時間か。
まさかお急ぎでした？
実は今日は仕事できてるんだよ。防災指導のためにさ。
そうだったんですか？お時間取らせてすみません。
ああ、いいのいいの。こっちも話せて嬉しかったよ。
Alright. Give me the
ああ、
goods.
何かあったらすぐに呼んでね。ほんじゃね。
Oh, okay. Just a Mashiro thing. And with that, Jun waved her hand and left. Mashiro muttered as she watched her leave.
あー、かっこよかった。
Mashiro's face lit up in admiration. Natsuhiko reflected on the conversation Jun and Mashiro just had. There's nothing more valuable than the treasure of life, huh? Now that I think about it, I might have said something like that long ago. How long ago was the question? Flashback time. As if unlocked by the heat of the moment, another door in Natsuhiko's memories opened wide. For Mashiro and Natsuhiko decided to keep Sirius at the park. Take care of him enthusiastically. When Yuri learned about the situation, she also worked hard to help out. In the end, Sirius didn't go hungry, which was a big relief to Natsuhiko. That relief would not continue for long. One day, about a month after they started keeping Sirius, Yuri gave Natsuhiko and Mashiro an ominous warning.
聞いた？二人とも
何が？
近頃ね、保健所って人たちが野良犬狩りをしてるんだって。
Eh?
野良犬狩り？
町の美化計画の一環で野良犬をみんな捕まえちゃおうって。
捕まったらどうなるの？
殺されちゃうって。
Natsuhiko and Mashiro's bodies shook at those words.
シリウス？
Natsuhiko and Mashiro ran through the park. Yuri stayed put since they told her it was dangerous. Mashiro shouted in every which way. She feared that perhaps he had already been taken away, but at the very next moment, Sirius came flying out of the woods.
シリウス！
よかった。
Mashiro sighed in relief.
でもいつかは保健所に見つかっちゃうよな。
Even a child Natsuhiko's age could imagine that. Stray dog roundup was happening all across the city, so no matter where he went, he'd be found eventually.
お母さんとかに言えば何とかしてくれるかな。
They had been keeping him in the park because nobody could take him in. Even if they had made it a collar or a doghouse, the adults would see Sirius as nothing but a stray. Even so, they still couldn't just abandon him.
いや、マシロ。僕らでシリウスを助けよう。
Mashiro gulped as Natsuhiko said that.
そうしたいのは私も同じだけど、でもどうすればいいの？
それを今から考えるんだよ。シリウスを見捨てるなんて絶対あっちゃいけないんだ。命より大切な宝物なんてどこにもないんだから。
That was another line Natsuhiko stole from a hero he was obsessed with at the time, but it seemed to have resonated in Mashiro's heart.
だよね。私たちがどうにかしないとシリウスが死んじゃうもんね。
その通りだ。
Natsuhiko and Mashiro nodded at each other and then looked at Sirius.
シリウス、必ず僕らが助けてやるからな。
Natsuhiko remembered the serious expression on Mashiro's face back then. It didn't seem like Mashiro changed one bit since those days. Mashiro's had grown and become more feminine in some regards, but I guess she's still the same as she always was. She would abide by her own kindness at all costs. As long as her conscience told her to do so, she'd go through any danger at all. So perhaps it's only natural that she'd admire Jun so much for working hard and earnestly for that same goal even as an adult. As Natsuhiko reminisced, Sally was interrupted by tugging at his sleeve.
二人とも
Mood. Mood.
そろそろ行かない？昼休みが過ぎてゆく。ああ。
When he looked at his watch, Natsuhiko realized there were only 40 minutes left of lunch break.
ごめんごめん。お腹減ってたんだよね。うん。時期限界。
Thanks, Mashiro.
それじゃ屋上行こうか。
Three of them hurried up the stairs. Man from Labo, oh no. Lunch break ended and thus the first afternoon class began. It was a special lecture from a visiting guest. Is it Ukita? Not that guest lectures were all that rare. Rokumei Academy actively contacted outside research institutions and enterprises for industry academic cooperation. The guest lecturer of the day was someone Natsuhiko knew very well.
はじめまして。原子力生物学機構第6研究所の研究員浮田啓二です。
Fucking Ukita. Indeed, Ukita was a staff member at Labo, just like Natsuhiko's mother. He was the guest lecturer today. Ukita seemed a little awkward and unaccustomed to giving lectures, but appeared to be in good health at least. Mashiro whispered gently into Natsuhiko's ear from the next seat.
おじさんのあの事故の怪我、大したことなかったみたいだね。
そうみたいだな。安心したよ。
That said, it was quite unfortunate that he had to fulfill an extra work duty like this right after an accident. Ukita himself seemed a little uneasy about Natsuhiko and Mashiro's glances, as he began to strain himself to speak.
今日はですね、原子力科学についての講義をしに来ました。これはこの町の住人として知っておかねばならない知識ですね。
Nuclear power. The topic was even a part of Rokumei Academy's peculiar curriculum. Natsuhiko was as bad as this subject as he was with BC. It's not like I can learn to like it. But Ukita came all the way out here for a guest lecture. So Natsuhiko thought that he might as well try to listen seriously for once today.
原子力科学というものを学ぶ上でまず知らなくてはならないのが放射能の恐ろしさですね。もう半世紀近くも前になりますが、ロシアのチェルノブイリ原発で起きた事故の話は皆さんも聞いたことがあるでしょう。人類史上最大の人災。今でもあの事故はそのように呼ばれています。
Ukita spoke in a bitter voice.
あの事故の概要は当時その発電所で使用されていた原子炉がメルトダウン、つまり炉心融解の後爆発し10トンにも及ぶ放射性物質がまき散らされたというものです。これは広島型原爆の500倍の量に及び、それによる死者は膨大な数に上りました。近隣の住民や事故処理に当たった消防士など3000人が死亡、そしてその後も増え続けました。最終的な死者数は今となっては分かりませんが、数十万人にも及ぶとさえ言われております。
Ukita's voice gradually intensified, filling the classroom with tension.
かくも多くの死者を生んだ原因はやはり放射性物質にあります。死の灰とも呼ばれるそれは爆発と火災により空に舞い上がって雨とともに降り注ぎました。これが実に恐ろしいのです。ただの爆発事故ではなく、悪影響が広範に広がるという点が。 それを浴びた人々は重篤にして致命的な症状を発します。神経障害、脳機能障害、遺伝子異常、そしてがん。
Natsuhiko gulped as Ukita continued.
九段の原発のあった町はそれまで極めて豊かで先進的な都市だったのですが、一夜にして人の住めない土地となり、12万の住人が移住を余儀なくされました。汚染の影響は今もまだ続き、安全な土地に戻るまであと900年かかると言われています。
As Ukita continued, a solemn silence spread throughout the classroom.
さて、我がラボにも研究用の原子炉があります。万が一それがメルトダウンし、放射性物質が飛散したら、この町でも同様のことが起きる可能性が。
Those words sparked tension in the room. But Ukita soon continued.
と心配する人も多いでしょうが、それは絶対にありえません。そもそもチェルノブイリ原発は非常にずさんな運営体制が取られており、事故もそれによって起こったのです。しかし、ラボには不測の事態に対応するシステムが幾重にもわたり完備されています。
And with that, Ukita fiddled with the PC at hand, upon which the screen displayed an image of Labo.
我がラボにはあらゆる災害に対応するシステムが完備されています。事故やトラブルを防ぐため、原子炉はスーパーコンピューターにより常に監視・制御されており、さらに万が一そのスパコンがダウンした際にも、地上フロアの遠隔制御室から原子炉の緊急停止などがいつでも可能です。加えて3つの原子炉制御システムと3系統計60の予備電源が非常時の対応を保証。防火防災システムはもちろん、侵入者を防ぐ警備体制も万全。原子炉自体も地下にありますし、しかも原子炉のある区画は特に頑強に作られております。原子炉周辺で爆発が起ころうと、巨大地震が起きようと、飛行機が突っ込んでこようと崩れることはありません。つまりチェルノブイリの二の鉄を踏むことは絶対にありえないのです。生徒の皆さん、どうかご安心ください。我がラボでは事故など起きないようになっていますのでね。
Honest. We won't do it. Ukita looked around the classroom as he spoke. An air of relief filled the class. Upon which Mashiro timidly raised a question that felt more like a sales pitch than a presentation. Educational presentation.
浮田先生、それでも事故が起きたらどうなるんでしょう。
と申しますと、事故が起きたときはどう対応するのかということですか？
そうです。昔国内でも大きな事故があったと聞きますので。
なるほどですね。
Correct.
ではご説明します。
Ukita used the PC to display a different image on the screen.
まず昔と今では建屋の施工技術も安全基準も格段に高くなっております。ラボ内の壁、床などは無論、普段から放射性物質が漏れ出さないよう設計されていますが、万が一の事態が発生した際には自動的に放射能漏洩防止システムが作動。無数に設置された隔壁やゲートが閉鎖され、放射性物質の拡散を完全にシャットアウトします。さらに自動通報システムにより、直ちに所轄の消防署に通報が入り、消防士およびレスキュー隊が即座に出動し、事故処理と人命救助を行う決まりになっているのです。
レスキュー隊。
Marsha's expression stiffened. She was probably thinking of June.
大丈夫なんですか？チェルノブイリの時には消防士さんが大勢亡くなったんでしょ？
当時は核に対する理解が足りず、装備も乏しかった時代ですからね。でも今は違いますよ。我が市のレスキュー隊は NBC 災害に対する訓練も積んでおりますので。
I understand this is all happening because in theory you could play these routes in either order. But having already finished one route, this is all
NBC 災害
repetition.
って何ですか？
NBC とはニュークリア、バイオロジカル、ケミカルの頭文字を取ったもので、核、細菌、そして化学物質による災害の総称です。我々のラボで災害が起きた場合は N、つまり核による災害ということになります。レスキュー隊の装備には強力な放射線を防ぐ防護服が配備されています。また少々の被爆状態であれば体内の放射性物質を無効化、体外に排出できる薬もありまして、これらの装備は我がラボで研究開発され、極めて高い救命性を実現しております。
Ukita continued with a considerable force behind his voice.
しかしこれらは全てあくまで保険です。我がラボはチェルノブイリなどの教訓を生かし、起きた事故に対応する方法以上に事故を起こさないよう予防することに全力を注いでいます。
Very bold.
先に説明したあらゆる保険はおそらく使われることはありませんよ。永遠。
それなら安心かな。
After hearing all that explanation, an expression of relief rose up on Mashiro's face.
すみません、変な質問して。
いえいえ、不安が取り除けたなら何よりです。
Editor's note: everything would not, in fact, be okay. Ukita himself sighed similarly in relief before he continued.
ともかく我がラボはそのような体制のもとに原子炉を運用し、さまざまな研究を行っています。
Okay, shut up, Ukita.
例えば、昨年から始めた研究の内容として、
Ukita began talking about research conducted at Labo. But Natsuhiko was completely inattentive. Couldn't get his mind off of the safety measures Ukita talked about. Oh, choices for everyone. But we're gonna end this here. After... Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, fucking hell. That's what I get for not reading the tips last video. 10 billion tips to read. Well, okay. INES, short for International Nuclear Events Scale, introduced by the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Nuclear Energy Agency, OECD, NEA, in 1990. Adopted internationally since 1992, the INES scale is used to describe the severity of nuclear accidents. The scale has 7 levels ranging from level 1, anomaly, to level 7, major accident. Chernobyl disaster is considered a level 7. However, considering its place as the highest level, level 7 events can be said to be defined as all events more severe than level 6. Therefore, even if another level 7 event were to occur, caution would be necessary to compare the two events as they would not necessarily be equivalent. Based on that thought, some specialists argue that a level 8 should be added to the scale. If a nuclear reactor's core melts or becomes otherwise damaged by meltdown, the event is deemed at least at level 4. You can have anomalies, you can have just straight up leakages, exposures. Meltdowns go to level 4 and above. That's fair. Middle diagram. Simple spread by composer, choreographer, and part-time esotericist Georges Ivanovich Gurdjieff, after he had come across it in his travels during the turn of the 20th century. The enneagram is composed of 9 points drawn on a circle with 9 lines connecting them. The word enneagram comes from the Greek ennea, 9, and gramma, something drawn. Note that Gurdjieff rarely came across this symbol. Its roots are said to be in ancient Greece or China, but there are various conflicting opinions on its origin. Starting in the 1960s, the enneagram became popularly used as a figure depicting the supposed 9 essential types of people that everyone could be categorized into at birth. And we know the reformer, helper, achiever, individualist, investigator, loyalist, enthusiast, challenger, peacemaker, yep. Some complain about a lack of evidence to categorize all people into these 9 types, but the enneagram is still used today as a teaching tool for its leaders and coaches, as well as in fortune telling. I think the part that interests me the most about the enneagram that has in most personality descriptions. In the descriptions of the types, they have, this is your default type. Think, in times of stress, you follow the graph, and you proceed to, you sort of fade into the traits of a different type. In times of growth, you advance into traits of a different type. It's all following the graph, too, how it's arranged. I think that's the part I like the most about it, because you can... It's basic types, but you can make it as basic type-like, or as detailed as you want, really. Nuclear power, yes. Release of energy from the decay, fusion, or fission of an atomic nucleus. Since nuclear fission in particular generates vast amounts of energy from small amounts of fuel, nuclear power generation is used today as a source of electricity. Uranium is the typical example of an element that easily undergoes nuclear fission. By hitting a uranium atom with a neutron, the atom emits heat energy as it splits into two and emits free neutrons of its own. A nuclear reactor uses this property to chain the reactions of multiple uranium fissions consecutively. Fast heat energy generates steam which turns the turbines of a power generator, thereby generating electrical energy. However, even the correct usage of nuclear power produces radiation and radioactive waste. Thus, nuclear power plants must be prepared in the event of a meltdown. Radioactive waste can contaminate the soil and create victims. In that regard, nuclear power isn't an unconditionally welcome technology, perhaps a necessary evil to allow people to live comfortably. At least that's the thought that's taken root in a considerable amount of people. It's been over 100 years after German physicist Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen has discovered the type of radiation known as the X-ray in 1895. A time longer than the lives of most humans, but little more than a fleeting moment in the scale of human history. Should we rid ourselves of nuclear power or control it? The humans living today may perhaps be at the crossroads of that decision. We have sun and wind. Why we don't advance more into that will always baffle the mind. No, it won't baffle the mind. It's because capitalism and fucking oil companies. The oil lobby. Bastards. Elementary particle, the smallest known unit into which matter can be divided. In the 19th century, the smallest unit was thought to be the atom. At the end of the 19th century, it was thought to be the electron. At the start of the 20th century, the proton and neutron were discovered, and thus the electron, the proton, and the neutron became the three elementary particles. Halfway through the 20th century, the non-massless meson and neutrino were found in quick succession, prompting scientists to keep researching further with much enthusiasm. The history of elementary particles can also be said to be the history of elementary particle physics, and thus things classified as elementary particles change depending on the time period. The reclassification of elementary particles is neither strange nor complicated. It is the same as how the world record holders of the various Olympic sports events change as the games continue. Yeah, science advances, always. Pripyat. A secret city in northern Ukraine, formerly the Soviet Union. The city was constructed for the purpose of housing Chernobyl nuclear power plant workers. It was home to tens of thousands of inhabitants. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster of 1986 forced the entire city to evacuate. Today, nothing remains but ruins. The secret city, Pripyat, was left off the maps before the disaster. Despite the nature of the city, it was said that its inhabitants were not thoroughly informed of its nuclear power plant, and were late in responding to the evacuation. The incident triggered the advancement of the Soviet Union's glasnost, openness and transparency of ideas and expression. Radioactive material still covers Pripyat today. It's said that it will still take hundreds of years before the area is inhabitable by humans. Shame, really. 7 to go. Maxwell's Demon. When a warm object and a cool object are left in contact, heat transfers from the warm object to the cool object until both objects eventually reach a uniform temperature, equilibrium. Generating heat from electricity is easy, but generating electricity from heat is difficult. fundamental property of energy is explained by the second law of thermodynamics. As long as no work is added to a system, the law is absolute. Now suppose we have a demon. What separates this demon from humans is that he can perceive the movement of the particles. Let's put him or her in charge of a box. This box has two sides sectioned off by a wall with a small door. One side contains a gas at a uniform temperature. When the demon notices a fast particle moving towards the door from that side, he opens the door. He keeps hurling these fast particles onto one side. Movement of the fast particles generates heat. So without adding... Without adding any changes to the system, the demon has divided a body of uniform temperature into a warm side and a cool side. This action contradicts the second law of thermodynamics. The thought experiment was proposed by Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell and is known as Maxwell's demon. It's easy to just say that the demon doesn't exist. However, unless you can prove that the demon doesn't exist, you cannot dismiss the thought experiment as illogical. The demon's existence is, shall we say, a devil's proof. The devil is in the details. For nearly 150 long years, Maxwell's demon has tormented physicists. Eventually, it was confirmed that the observation and screening of particles was impossible without the consumption of energy, thus reconciling the demon's contradiction with the second law. In 2010, a joint research team from the University of Tokyo and Chuo University successfully produced energy using observational information above. Thus converting information into energy, they announced that they had created a kind of Maxwell's demon. Remember the asterisk, though, in that opening and closing the door consumes energy in itself, so it's not out of nowhere. Ah, relativity, hell yeah. Perhaps you'd had the experience where you've thought that the car you're in. Fuck. Perhaps you'd had the experience where you'd thought the car you were in was moving, when in actuality it. Oh, fuck. Ugh. Perhaps you've had the experience where you've thought that the car you were in was moving, when in actuality it was the car you were looking at outside that moved. Speed is often known in relative terms, and it is hard to tell for sure exactly how fast you are moving. Even when you measure an object's speed, you really measure its speed in relation to the ground. This is an example of Galileo Galilei's principle of relativity. Does the Earth move, or does the Sun move? It's difficult to know for sure, which is why the geocentric model pervaded for so long before Copernicus proposed the heliocentric model. But in 1905, a certain Albert Einstein discovered that the speed of light remained constant regardless of the frame of reference, principle of invariant light speed. Based on the aforementioned principle of relativity, he announced the special principle of relativity and its matching special theory of relativity. The special refers to how it only applies to a special coordinate system, called the inertial coordinate system, that accounts only for the inertia working on an object, not the gravity working on it. The addition of accounting for gravity is called the general theory of relativity. Theory of relativity refers to both special and general forms. E equals mc squared, the mass-energy equivalence formula used in the special theory of relativity, is said to be one of the most beautiful formulas on the Earth and is known by many. E is energy, m is mass, and c is the speed of light in a vacuum. Yoko Tenkawa has her own unique ideas about this formula. Enormous release of energy requires an equivalently large loss of mass. Adapting this idea to our own circumstances, she thinks that a large success requires an equivalently large sacrifice. To clear a path for her beloved son's future, she had to abandon even their mutual trust and familial bond in order to devote herself to research. Or at least that was the weak excuse she made to push herself to be a strong mother after her husband's death. Well, that just went places. Alright. Sure. Don't expect me to feel bad for Miyoko Tenkawa right now. We'll see what happens down the line, but... Empathy. Yeah, don't expect me to feel bad for Miyoko Tenkawa right now. No. Next time. That's too much for one go. Sorry.